Worship. How long has it been since you stopped and really thought about worship? What is it? Why is it important to me? How do I worship in a way that pleases God? Christian worship is a learning experience. I'm Bobby Watkins, and I'm hoping in the days ahead that I can share some things with you that will cause you to stop, to consider, to examine your worship as a worshiper, as a worship leader, and how you can help others. You see, worship is not just something we do every Sunday and we have all the answers and we're all set. But no, worship is a learning experience. It's a path that we can walk and learn and have a better understanding about worship. My worship walk started in 1974, 46 years ago. When I finished my university work, I studied music education at Baylor University. My desire was to be a choral conductor. Wasn't thinking about worship, wasn't even thinking about church music. But when I completed my work toward my music education degree, God met me and said, "Follow me." And he called me to church music ministry. So in 1974, I went to my very first church to serve as what was called at that time a minister of music. Well, that's changed a lot in 46 years. Titles have changed. Fortunately, in the evangelical church in America, we started thinking more about worship again and not just about church music. But I do hope that you'll join me in the future as we try to share some ideas that will help you to stop and think. There are no experts walking the earth today that have all the answers about worship. Now, there's a lot of good people we can learn from. Worship leaders, worship musicians, Christian artists. But the only true authority about church music worship is our Father, who someday, when we see him face to face, he can really help us to learn what worship's all about. Well, why are we doing this? Well, I have really been honored in the past 6-7 years to be teaching once each year first-year worship students at the Ukrainian Baptist Theological Seminary in Lviv, Ukraine. What a blessing it has been to me to be with some of the finest musicians in the world, but not just great musicians, but some of the finest young people that really have a desire to worship and to help other people worship as well. So I've been blessed to go each year since 2014 and teach students, and I was there at the beginning of this year, 2020. Well, you know what this year has brought to the world. A pandemic, COVID-19. And days are so uncertain as far as travel and when we'll be able to be with these students again. But I'm really thankful to have the opportunity, at the invitation of the seminary, to record these sessions. And not only do I record these for the seminary, so they can take these, translate them, edit them however they like. But I hope to be able to even share some of these with you, my friends, that I've known through the years. Well, if you didn't know me before, my name is Bobby Watkins, and I live currently in Liberty Lake, Washington, which is in the Spokane area of Eastern Washington. But my heart, I must admit, my heart on this earth has spent so much of its time in Ukraine, and I miss being there with Ukrainian people. But in the coming days, we'll try to share some ideas. Well, what ideas will we share? Back in 2010, I was in my last year of full-time ministry on the local church here in America, and I didn't really realize at that time that it would be my last year of full-time service because I didn't know God was about to make some big changes. But in that year, I wrote some articles. They were entitled 10 Steps in the Path of a Worship Leader. Well, I wrote those for our church newsletter. And when I was in Ukraine, because that's where God had then led me to follow him in 2011, I was able to meet leadership there at the seminary. And I had these articles which had been translated by that time into Russian and Ukrainian. And I left a copy of these articles with leadership. And they looked at those. And the Dean Volodia, he said to me, these are things that could be of value to our students. So at his invitation, I returned and began teaching. Well, as we taught those, and then we expanded to make sure that we brought in some biblical principles into our worship sessions. Well, not just my ideas and experiences, which the 10 steps in the path of a worship leader. Those were more about practical things that were not taught, but things that we learn from experience. But also some biblical ideas. So I turned to some things that really helped me to look at biblically about worship that sometimes, especially as musicians, we overlook. And I took a lot of ideas from worship, believers experiencing God. The Henry Blackaby and Ron Owens had written from Lifeway, published that workbook, and it's been such a great tool to me. So in the coming days, I'll be sharing some things from the 10 steps in the path of a worship leader, and we'll be looking at some biblical principles that were brought to my attention once again by Henry Blackaby and Ron Owens. Worship is so much bigger than we realize. Worship cannot be understood by men. We try, we want to know more about it. But if anything else, I want you to realize that worship is just a progressive learning experience of getting to know God. Worship's an encounter. Worship is a relationship. Worship's not our music. Worship is giving all we have and laying it before the feet of our Almighty God, our Creator. So I hope that as we make these available, that they will be of help to you. You don't have to agree with it, but to stop, to think about it, to consider. Maybe with some worship team, you take some of these ideas that will be shared and you discuss it and then decide for yourself, what is God saying to me? That's my desire for you. I do trust that God will take our feeble efforts and do something great with them. God's been good to me. I do not deserve to have been placed in areas of leadership, but that's our God. From 1974 till 2011, God gave me full-time ministry, vocational ministry in church music and worship. 10 of those years to be honored to serve Northwest Baptist in Washington, Oregon, and Northern Idaho as a worship consultant, worship strategist with the Northwest Baptist Convention. But may God speak to you. I hope you'll join me. And if you have thoughts, if you have questions about what we're going to be sharing or about what we have shared, I'd love to hear from you. You can contact me through email, bobbywatkins1950@gmail.com, or you can send me a text. You can use Viber if you're in Ukraine, or in America, you can do +1 509 481 3332. God bless you. Join me on a worship walk, and let's see what God will do. God bless you.